Returning to Formula One in 2010, Mercedes have become one of the most successful teams in recent history, taking home both the Drivers' and Constructors' Championships in each of the last 6 seasons. In 2009, they were an engine supplier for the famous Brawn GP racing team. This was their way back into the sport, as their parent company purchased a stake in the Brawn GP team for the 2010 season. The team was then rebranded under the current Mercedes name, and the rest is history. Perhaps the most famous Formula One racing team of them all, Scuderia Ferrari have been competing in the sport since the birth of the World Championship in 1950. As well as having participated in every World Championship race, they're also the most decorated, with more wins than any other team in the history of the sport. Founded by Enzo Ferrari in 1929, Ferrari originally supported Alfa Romeo, before later forging their own identity as the racing team and road car manufacturer we know today. Many of the world's most famous and recognizable drivers have competed and become champions with Ferrari, including Niki Lauda in the 1970s and Michael Schumacher in the 90s and early 2000s. Red Bull made their constructors' debut in Formula One in 2005. Since then, they have become incredibly successful, with 4 Drivers' Championships and 4 Constructors' Championships to their name. For 11 seasons, the Red Bull team used Renault engines in their cars, but switched to Honda power units for the start of the 2019 season. Honda also supplied the power plant for the other Red Bull-owned team in Formula One, AlphaTauri. Synonymous with the sport, McLaren have been heavily involved in Formula One since their debut in 1966 at Monaco. In this time, they have had incredible success, bringing home 8 Constructors' Championships and 12 Drivers' Championships, making them the second most successful team of all time. For many, 1988 was probably the most memorable season for McLaren, where the team won 15 out of 16 races, with drivers Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost. The team absolutely dominated the year, and to this day, McLaren still holds the record for the highest percentage of wins in a single season. They have had many of the world's most highly regarded drivers racing for them, including Senna and Prost, Mika Häkkinen and Lewis Hamilton, who won the Drivers' Championship during the 2008 season. Renault has been a part of Formula One for more than 40 years, starting as a constructor in 1977. As well as having their own team, they have acted as engine supplier for various partners over the years, where they have shared in many successes, including an incredible run in the 1990s with Williams and 4 back-to-back titles with Red Bull from 2010 to 2013. Renault won both the Constructors' and Drivers' Championships in 2005 and 2006. The Red Bull-owned AlphaTauri team was originally formed in 2006 under the name Scuderia Toro Rosso, with the intention of helping Red Bull's junior drivers, giving them a potential path into the parent team, Red Bull Racing. This allowed the Red Bull team to have 4 drivers racing during the same season. Since 2010, they have worked independently, with their own car being designed and built in Faenza, Italy. In 2008, the team achieved their one and only pole position and victory at the Italian Grand Prix at Monza, with young superstar Sebastian Vettel in the driving seat. BWT Racing Point F1 team is made up of true racers. Based in Silverstone, the team celebrates 30 years in the sport in 2020. Although there have been many names above the door over the years, the passion and determination remains as strong as ever. 2019 was a year of learning for Racing Point, with drivers Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll collecting 73 points and 7th place in the Constructors' Championship. The team is setting its sights higher moving forward and is determined to return to the front of the midfield. Alfa Romeo Racing, formerly Sauber F1, have a long and varied history in motorsport, competing in various disciplines since the 1970s. But it wasn't until 1993 that they began their Formula One campaign. They've partnered with multiple engine manufacturers throughout their time in the sport, including both Ford and Ferrari. But the best results they achieved were between 2006 and 2009, where they worked with BMW, achieving second place and third place in the Constructors' Championships in 2007 and 2008, respectively. 2018 saw them bring back iconic brand Alfa Romeo to F1 as their title sponsor, a partnership that was extended in 2019. Making their debut in 2016, the USA-based Haas team began strongly in the midfield, with Frenchman Romain Grosjean bringing his car across the finish line in 6th place in the team's very first race in the 2016 Australian Grand Prix. Since then, the Haas outfit have become regular points finishers. Ferrari supply the power units and transmission to Haas as part of a technical partnership, which has helped the team maintain their cost-effective and sustainable operation. Making their debut in 1977, Williams are one of the most famous and well-recognized teams in motorsport. They started out as a very small single-car team in the 1970s and made their way to a position of absolute dominance through parts of the 1990s. In that time, Williams have had some of the most famous and accomplished drivers of all time in the driver's seat, including Nigel Mansell, Damon Hill, Jenson Button, and, of course, the late, great Ayrton Senna. Williams have partnered with multiple engine manufacturers over the years, with the most successful by far being Renault in the 1990s, with whom they would win multiple championships. In total, Williams have had a long and very successful history in the sport, with over 100 Formula One race wins to their name. The McLaren MP44, powered by the formidable Honda RA168E engine, won 15 out of the 16 races in the 1988 Formula One season. The combination of engine, driving position, low center of gravity and advanced aerodynamics made the MP44 virtually unbeatable. It was so successful that it set the record for most wins in a single season. Ayrton Senna and Alain Prost finished the 1988 season in first and second place in the Drivers' Championship respectively, giving the McLaren Honda team a 66-point lead over second place Ferrari. The 641, also known as the F190, was a similar-looking car to its predecessor, the 640. Lots of development was focused on keeping the engine as efficient as possible, specifically in improving cooling and airflow, which also involved aerodynamic tweaks to the bodywork. The car also featured a larger fuel tank and revised transmission. Ferrari's biggest gain for 1990 was the signing of Alain Prost from McLaren. 1990 proved to be the height of the famed rivalry between Prost and Ayrton Senna, where both drivers once again fought for the World Championship, but this time, of course, driving for different teams. The team took 6 wins that year, 5 for Prost and 1 for his teammate Nigel Mansell, and would ultimately finish runner-up in both championships. The MP45B was developed for the 1990 season with changes to body durability, larger fuel load, adjusted suspension geometry and a heavily reworked transmission. As a result, the car proved to be hugely successful during qualifying, eventually claiming a total of 12 pole positions. However, the Ferrari F190, driven by Ayrton Senna's great rival Alain Prost, kept the competition very close. Throughout the season, the development of the MP45B continued, with reduction in the weight of the engine, and later in the year, an increase in engine power, thanks to higher rev limits and an improved fuel compound. Ayrton Senna finished the season as world champion, and once again took McLaren to the Constructors' title. The first car for the Jordan F1 team, the Jordan 191, debuted at the 1991 USA Grand Prix with a 10th place finish courtesy of French driver Bertrand Gachot. Powered by the Ford HBA4 V8 engine, the car would earn the fledgling team 13 points over the 16-race season, with a best finish of 4th. It was a highly respectable debut season for Eddie Jordan's team, and when a seat became available for the final 6 races of the year, a talented young German by the name of Michael Schumacher was offered his chance in Formula One. In his one and only race for the Jordan team, Schumacher achieved their highest qualifying position to date at the Belgian Grand Prix, 7th place, although he retired from the race due to a clutch failure halfway around the first lap. The McLaren MP46 was McLaren's first Formula One car to feature a V12 engine. Although the power plant was much heavier than in previous seasons, the rest of the car had gone through an extensive weight-saving program, which resulted in a very similar final weight to previous years. Despite strong competition from the continually improving Williams FW14 Renault, McLaren held on to win the Constructors' title, and Ayrton Senna finished the World Championship in first place. The FW14B was an evolutionary development of the 1991 FW14 and made its race debut at the 1992 South African Grand Prix. Throughout the course of the year, the FW14B would prove to be the car to beat, winning the opening 5 races of the 1992 season. A crucial factor in the performance advantage was the use of an active ride suspension system used following a rigorous pre-season testing program. Nigel Mansell drove the car to a record-setting 9 race wins on his way to a fully deserved and hard-earned Drivers' Championship, whilst his teammate Riccardo Patrese scored 1 victory and a number of podium positions to give the team victory in the Constructors' Championship and engine supplier Renault their first championship in Formula One. The Benetton B194, designed by Rory Byrne for the 1994 season, was an exceptionally competitive car in the wake of new technical regulations, which had banned the electronic driver aids prevalent in the previous year. Powered by a Ford Zetec R V8 engine produced by Cosworth, the B194 proved difficult to handle. JJ Lehto, Jos Verstappen and Johnny Herbert all sat in the driver's seat throughout the season, but of them only Verstappen managed to reach the podium. In the hands of Michael Schumacher, however, the B194 won 8 times in the 16-race season and was involved in the controversial collision between Schumacher and rival Damon Hill, which clinched the 1994 Drivers' Championship in favour of the esteemed German. The Benetton B195 was an evolution of the B194, which had propelled Michael Schumacher to the driver's title the previous year, and was now powered by a Renault RS7 V10 engine. Although drivers Michael Schumacher and Johnny Herbert had complaints around the balance and stability of the car, it nonetheless had the pace to take the fight to their main championship rivals, Williams. By the end of the 17-race season, the B195 had scored 11 victories, 4 pole positions and 8 fastest laps, resulting in the Benetton team's one and only Constructors' Championship. The FW18 appeared for its race debut at the 1996 Australian Grand Prix. New technical regulations for the 1996 season gave the FW18 an unusually shaped cockpit area, but despite this, the evolutionary approach adopted by the car's designers gave the FW18 a look that bore a clear resemblance to its predecessor, the FW17. Damon Hill was joined in the team by Canada's Jacques Villeneuve, the 1995 IndyCar champion. These two drivers dominated the season, winning 12 out of 16 races between them, putting both championships out of reach of their rivals by mid-August. 1996 represented the Williams team's most statistically successful season. The focus of the new technical regulations in 1998 were to improve safety by reducing cornering speeds. This led to the cars being made more narrow, and all 4 tyres now featured grooves to reduce overall grip. Much of the 1998 championship was dominated by the MP4-13 due to a mix of efficient aerodynamic and chassis design, suspension setup, and the Mercedes-Benz V10 engine, which was both powerful and incredibly reliable. In this car, Mika Häkkinen took victory in the World Drivers' Championship, and McLaren won the Constructors' title by a margin of 23 points. The Ferrari F1 2000 is the legendary car that took Michael Schumacher to his 3rd driver's title, his first at Ferrari, and marked the beginning of the Italian manufacturer's historic era of supremacy in the early and mid-2000s. The car was a direct evolution of its predecessor, the F399, with improved aerodynamics and a lower center of gravity due to the wider V-angle of the new Ferrari Tipo 049 V10 engine. The F1 2000 finished 1st or 2nd in 13 of the 17 races that season, and never had a classified result outside the points. The Williams FW25 represented a big step forward from the race-winning FW24 of the previous year, which had great raw speed but lacked consistency, a problem that the team were determined to solve with their new design. The latest offering from engine partner BMW, the P83 V10, again saw the Munich-based organization field the most powerful engine on the Formula One grid. A stunning victory by Juan Pablo Montoya through the streets of Monaco proved the highlight in a strong season for the team. Further victories in the European, French and German Grand Prix saw the Williams F1 team finish as runners-up in the Constructors' World Championship. Based on the F2003 GA, the F2004 featured many changes throughout the car, including a new, more robust gearbox, lower center of gravity, revised rear wing, and redesigned rear suspension to assist in prolonging the life of the tyres. The engine was new, with a focus on lifespan and reliability, as new rules for that season required an engine to last a full race weekend. At the same time, Ferrari wanted to make the engine more powerful than the 051 that it replaced. The results were astonishing, giving the drivers the tools to take home 15 wins in a single season. 13 of those were delivered by Michael Schumacher alone, allowing him to easily win the World Championship and leading Scuderia Ferrari to the 2004 Constructors' title. Following on from their successful 2005 season, Renault had an excellent platform upon which to build their new car, the R26. Along with some aerodynamic changes, a new engine formula pushed the team to switch engines as well, moving to a smaller and less powerful V8 engine over the previous V10. This was also the first year that Renault used a 7-speed transmission, which enabled them to get the most out of their new V8, which lacked the torque of the monstrous V10s. The R26 employed mass damper technology, which was used to help keep the front of the car more stable through cornering, over curbs, and over track undulations. The higher stability gave the car more efficient aerodynamics and proved to be highly successful. However, later in the 2006 season, the system was deemed illegal by the FIA and had to be removed. Renault went on to win the Constructors' Championship despite this, and their driver Fernando Alonso won the Drivers' title. Ferrari made many changes to this car over its predecessor, the 248 F1. In order to increase aerodynamic efficiency, the wheelbase was increased, creating a longer nose. The rear end was made narrower, molded around the transmission housing. Work was also put into the bodywork and front suspension to reduce drag. The F2007 had run multiple liveries over the course of the season due to advertising regulations, and also began using a deeper shade of red at the Monaco Grand Prix. Kimi Räikkönen took his first ever World Championship win in the F2007, and Scuderia Ferrari won the Constructors that season too. The MP423 made revisions from its predecessor with a longer wheelbase, improved aerodynamic pieces on the bodywork, and a brand new rear wing design. Throughout the year, McLaren experimented with different aerodynamic setups for various circuits, before settling on a consistent platform for the latter half of the season. McLaren finished second overall in the Constructors' Championship in 2008, but the Drivers' title was won by their driver Lewis Hamilton in a dramatic showdown at the Brazilian Grand Prix, making him, at the time, the youngest ever Formula One world champion. The BGP-001 design began its life under the banner of Honda Racing, before their withdrawal from the sport in 2008 led their operation to be taken over by Ross Brawn, forming Brawn GP. Mercedes were brought in as a partner to provide the naturally aspirated V8 engine for the 2009 season. New technical regulations were introduced in this season, chiefly aerodynamic changes focused around the front and rear wings. The famous double diffuser solution pioneered by the BGP-001 and others was controversial, as it exploited what some considered a loophole in the regulations, and the FIA received complaints from a number of other teams. The double diffuser was later judged to be legal and cleared for use. The BGP-001 had a very successful first half of the 2009 season, but other teams began to catch up later in the year. However, Brawn GP still comfortably won the Constructors' Championship, and Jenson Button clinched the driver's title in the penultimate Grand Prix. The 2010 season saw the removal of mid-race refueling from the regulations, which had dramatic effects on race strategy, tyre management and, of course, car design. Now loaded with around 105 kilos of fuel at the start of the race, significant redesigns were required in many areas of the Ferrari F10, particularly in regards to the braking system and the longer wheelbase required to fit the larger fuel tank. Ferrari achieved 5 wins throughout the 2010 season, all courtesy of Fernando Alonso, taking Ferrari to a final constructors' position of 3rd, behind McLaren Mercedes and Red Bull Renault. The MP425 featured improvements over its predecessor, the MP424, especially with an aerodynamic innovation which proved controversial among competing teams. The driver was able to draw in air through the cockpit via an intake on the nose of the car and divert the flow to stall the rear wing. Doing so would reduce aerodynamic drag and thus allow for higher top speeds. The system was deemed legal by the FIA prior to the first race of the season. This change, plus further improvements throughout the year, helped drivers Jenson Button and Lewis Hamilton to 5 victories between them. But this wasn't quite enough to take McLaren to the Constructors' title. They settled for 2nd position behind Red Bull Renault. An evolution of the very successful RB5, the RB6 gained a larger fuel tank, more efficient cooling on the brakes, a double-decker diffuser and a high-performing engine, once again supplied by Renault. Beyond this, the car was very similar to the RB5, illustrating the extent to which the earlier car had been ahead of the curve. As traditional for Sebastian Vettel, who names all of his cars, his RB6 was christened Luscious Liz. Later in the season, when he required a new chassis, his replacement was named Randy Mandy. Throughout the season, the team achieved 15 pole positions during qualifying, demonstrating the capability and competence of both car and drivers. Sebastian Vettel took the Drivers' World Championship, and Red Bull won the Constructors that season.